Welcome to Practicing the Practices, a learning and experiential podcast geared towards helping you apprentice with Jesus. Today, Casey and I are introducing a practice of discipleship that is going to be really upstream for some of us, against the grain. Casey, what are we talking about and practicing today?
Well, Brad, it's time to buckle your seatbelt. It's time for everybody to adjust their podcast playback speed from 1.5 back to 1.0. Yep, you got to do it, because today we are talking about the practice of slowing.
Please don't turn this podcast episode off. We promise it will be helpful.
Helpful and challenging and all of the things that we all need to do as we slow down.
Well, Casey, we are recording today's episode on November 1st. Can you believe we're already at the end of the year and almost into holiday season?
You know, I think you already know this about me. I love the fall. I'm one of those people.
You love the foliage.
I love the foliage. I love the pumpkin spice. Don't hate on me. I love it all. So I feel a little mourning happening in my soul that it's like almost over. Yeah. But I also feel excitement because, you know, we love the holiday season.
So listeners, because you're listening to us and can't see us, let me give you a little perspective. Casey, who serves on my staff here at Fellowship West as the pastor for spiritual formation. It's like mid-October, which was pretty balmy and summerish. Mm-hmm. She just denied the reality of the temperatures and wore her orange sweaters. Anyway.
Yep, boots, scarves.
Just turn the AC down to,
all the things.
To 58 and wear your stuff. So we are today going to take a few moments, Casey, and we're going to talk about 3 interconnected practices of discipleship. These might be some of the most challenging but critically important practices of discipleship that we can actually put before our listeners.
Yes, I think that when we think about how Jesus lived his life and what his daily life looked like, these are some of the most foundational practices of Jesus's life as we apprentice to him.
The 3 practices we're talking about over the next 3 episodes are slowing, silence and solitude, and Sabbath. These practices can help us more readily be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do the things Jesus did. So in 1974, Casey, 2 cardiologists, Meyer Friedman and Ray Rosenman, coined the term hurry sickness. What they had been doing was studying the effects of stress on the heart. A little side note, a lot of their research ended up leading to the theory of what we call type A and type B behaviors in our personality types. And in the type A behavior, the type A person being the driven, competitive, impatient person. And what the research began to show is that type of person, when not putting in some healthy slowing, some different paces of life, it actually led to physical and psychological health issues. And Casey, this was in the 1970s and the early 1980s. Casey, today, I mean, it seems like we are living our life in a hurry, not just occasionally, but you joked about moving our podcast listening speed from 1.5 to 1.0. That was inappropriate for you to, call that out at me. Not just kidding. But I mean, it feels like all of our life is just lived at the 1.5 or 2.0 speed.
It's just crazy to think that hurry sickness, this idea, this term that was coined, came out of the 70s and 80s. And I mean, what would these doctors think if they were to look at our culture now? And yeah, it's just crazy to think that if it was an issue back then, how much more is this such a necessity for those of us who want to follow Jesus, and how countercultural and challenging it'll be to live that way.
One of the great ironies as we get into the kind of the meat of what we want to talk about is many of us will be living at this kind of breakneck pace of life and going here to there. And whenever we get kind of a Selah moment, this moment where we can take our breath, maybe we get a chance to go to the mountains for the weekend, or we're on a walk, almost inevitably we will feel like this physical and psychological benefit from it. We will feel a spiritual benefit from it. We'll say, oh man, it was so good to have a weekend off. Like it's right there in front of us that, hey, this is healthy and good to do, but it sometimes doesn't actually work its way into the rhythms and practices and normal aspect of life. It's the exception, not the rule. We tend to slow down, not as a practice of regular, healthy, spiritual life, but rather we tend to slow down only when we're forced to. And so as we get into this, let's just take us back to the start. Talk to us a little bit about what you mean by slowing.
Yeah, we're going to really break down what is slowing, why we slow down, and how we do it. And to start, I love this quote by Adele Calhoun. She says this: "We can get so busy doing urgent things and so preoccupied with what comes next that we don't experience now. Afraid of being late, we rush from the past to the future. The present moment becomes a crack between what we did and what we have yet to do. It is virtually lost to us. We don't get to our futures any faster if we hurry, and we certainly don't become better people in haste. More likely than not, the faster we go, the less we become." Pretty sobering words. So what is this practice of slowing? Slowing is a practice that cultivates patience by putting ourselves in a position where we simply have to wait. So this is an intentional choice we're making to put ourselves in a posture of waiting and slowing down. And for most of us, this is going to be incredibly uncomfortable.
Well, you used a word in your description there that probably grates against some of us depending on our personality and wiring. You used the word patience. I mean, it is just not natural for many of us. You know, one of the things that people will say, including myself, is man, I'm just impatient. I'm just not very patient. I want it now. I want the microwave popcorn to somehow go from 2 minutes and 30 seconds to why are we not getting this in 30 seconds now? I remember when some of the shipping logistics things in the States kind of got out of whack a couple of months ago, and Amazon Prime had to suspend their 2-day shipping guarantee. Yeah. Like it was like, what are we going to, like it's part of the fabric of who you are, and it's just really hard.
Yeah, we live in a really unique time where we really can have things instantly, and everything is always about becoming more efficient. So this is, again, a really challenging practice to adopt.
Why? Let's really kind of press into why is this so important?
Well, Dallas Willard famously said that the key to a healthy spiritual life is to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And I think it kind of got touched on in that Adele Calhoun quote that we are not our best selves when we're rushing. If I think through some of my lowest, most disintegrated moments over the past couple weeks, it was almost always when I was in a hurry and rushing. So ruthlessly eliminating hurry from our lives is a way that we can grow spiritually, become people that are like Jesus, that do what Jesus did. And Jesus was not in a hurry. He was never in a hurry.
Hurry is not just about our schedule, is it?
John Ortberg famously said, hurry is not just a disordered schedule, but a disordered heart. So wow. This really is something that's starting inwardly and moving outwardly. So I know you talked about hurry sickness. Yeah. The first time I read that, it just blew my mind. Like, whoa, that term is such a good, poignant term. And so if you're listening today and you're wondering, does hurry sickness apply to you? You know, one of the ways that we change is we have to get aware first. So let's get real here for a moment. Here are some clues that you might be experiencing hurry sickness. So if you're constantly speeding up your daily activities, always trying to do more in less time, if you're always feeling behind schedule or running late most of the time, that might be a sign of hurry sickness. If you're rushing when there's no reason to be rushing, that one really stuck out to me. Like all of a sudden I'm like, why am I so moving so fast right now? What am I even trying to get to? If you feel irritable when you're interrupted or delayed, yeah. Interrupting or talking over people, can't seem to turn off the to-do list in your head, continuous multitasking, or, and this one really hits, not having any energy or attention for your loved ones at the end of the day or at the end of the week.
I have to believe that most everyone listening felt one, two, or more of those and said, yeah, that's me. So if you heard that, we're not talking to you, we're talking with you.
Oh, yeah.
And the reality is, Casey, this does move. This is not just about the mind and heart, but it does begin to sometimes show up in our life physically.
Yeah, I think that there's some other signs. Your body gives you signs if you are moving too quickly through your life. Fatigue would be an obvious one. But what if you have a lot of headaches, or you're getting sick all the time, your immune system is low, or even trouble sleeping? These could all be your body's way of telling you that it's time to slow down and take a little more care for yourself.
Casey, we feel this in our minds, we feel it in our body, but slowing is also a way to actually help nurture a deeper spirituality and connection with Jesus in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a few different ways that slowing really helps us to get more grounded and centered and connected with God. A couple are that first, slowing practices give us the opportunity to be present to what the Holy Spirit is doing and prompting around us. If we are always looking at our phone, rushing from thing to thing, we're just not aware of God's work around us. And we really believe the Spirit is constantly at work, revealing himself. And if we're not attuned or looking around or slow enough to see it, we'll miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is that slowing puts us in a posture of following rather than rushing ahead. That really spoke to me. Yeah. As followers of Jesus, it's really important that we slow down enough to follow behind Jesus.
Well, Jesus models this for us so well. So if you're familiar with the narrative of Jesus' temptation in the wilderness and his preparation for ministry, most people familiar with that know there's this 40-day period where Jesus is in silence and solitude, which we'll talk about in an upcoming episode. But one of the things I think that gets missed in that is Jesus comes out of that and then he does ministry, which is, sometimes one of the reasons we slow, one of the reasons we get into spaces of silence and solitude is so that we can actually have something to lay down and offer life. We can live the Christ life. We can be sacrificial. We can do ministry. We can serve others, including our family. Jesus does that and then immediately slows down again and takes another day, and so I think most of us be like, oh, I had 40 days off. I'm good for 4 years. But Jesus goes from 40 days to ministry and then right again into slowing down, slowing the pace, even as some of his followers begin to sense, hey, we've got momentum coming here. He's like, hey, no, we're not actually going to do that. We're going to pause here. We're going to take a moment. So yeah, I think Jesus shows us that we don't have to live in the tyranny of the urgent all of the time.
Yeah. One other really beautiful benefit of slowing is that it helps us to love others well. I love this quote by John Ortberg. He says, "Love and hurry are fundamentally incompatible. Love always takes time, and time is the one thing hurried people don't have."
Yeah.
When we live in the love of God, we begin to pay attention to people the way God pays attention to us. And so as I even reflect in my own life, what were the moments where I was most unloving over the past couple weeks? It's probably times where I was trying to get my kids in the car because we were hurrying and trying to get out the door to school. And it was moments where I felt like I was rushed, where I was hurrying. It can just really bring out an extremely unloving side of us. And so this practice helps us to really stop and see the human in front of us and love them well.
That's so good. So we're going to talk briefly as we close out this episode about some practices, some practical things that maybe we haven't thought of that can help us slow down. But I just want to kind of interject here. I think we know this. These practices we're about to recommend, there's no Bible verses for them. They're not, quote, biblical, but they're practical, against the grain practices that help us kind of put our normative behavior, which is hurry, into check, into slowing. Now, some of us are going to resist this. Some of us are going to reject this and maybe even say, that's silly. What's that really going to do? And if that's you in this moment, here's how I would challenge you. I would ask you to pause and engage your inner dialogue. Maybe say to your inner voice, methinks you do protest too much. That maybe if we're hearing this and we're resisting it, that is a warning sign on our dashboard that this is really for us.
Yeah, usually when there's resistance in us, I couldn't agree more. Resistance is a sign that there's something to be worked on with the Lord. So, and you and I resist these.
Yeah.
In our daily life. This is hard for everyone, and we really have to make a conscious choice if we're going to live this way. So here's some slowing practices, very practical things you can do to start to set yourself up and put yourself in a position where you will simply have to wait. This first one right off the gate is going to be hard. Drive in the slow lane, drive the speed limit, and make complete stops at the stop sign.
I hate everything that you just said. I don't disagree with it, but yeah, I feel it.
What would it feel like to purposely put yourself in the slow lane, not tune out, and talk to the Lord about what you're feeling? Another one, slow down your speech and be mindful to not interrupt others. I'm a fast talker. That one hits for me. Like I could get a lot of words in a short amount of time. So slow down your speaking. Look people in the eyes when in conversation, and not in your phone or not looking for the other person that you want to talk to, but really looking at people when you speak to them. Eat more slowly. Studies have actually shown that the optimal number of times to chew each bite of your food is between 20 and 30 times. And when we think of our fast food culture where we're eating on the run and we scarf our food down, what would it look like to eat slowly? Walk slower. So, one of my mentors leads a group of people on the Camino in Spain, the Camino de Santiago. It's a pilgrimage trip. And he has a day, it's like a 10-day day of walking, 10-day trip of walking. And one of the days, once they've kind of set their pace as a group, one of the days their spiritual practice is they identify who is always the slowest walker in the group, and everyone has to stay behind that person.
Wow.
So, and I can get a little impatient with slow walkers. So I feel that like, if I'm at an airport or at a big place and I'm trying to move fast, like get out of my way is kind of my attitude.
Yeah.
So slow walking is a hard one for me. Here's another one that's tough. Pick the longest line in the grocery store and don't look at your phone.
What could we possibly do instead of that though?
What about looking around and noticing maybe the older woman in line that might need some help getting her items onto the belt, the grocery belt, or the mom who's struggling with her 3 kids and they're all screaming and crying. And instead of just being annoyed because you're trying to look at something on your phone, really noticing the people around you. Build a 5-minute margin in between all scheduled activities and sit in silence and pray. So when you're going from meeting to thing, give yourself a margin in there. Take a moment, connect with what you just did, connect with what you're about to do. In the monastic tradition, that's called statio, that stopping moment. Kind of in that same vein, wait for 60 seconds every time you get in your car and before getting out of your car. And my husband has this habit, and I'm always like, stop dawdling. I tell him all the time, like, we just got to, like, the car stops and I'm out the door and in the place, like within 10 seconds. He like takes time, he kind of dawdles, and it like irritates me. But actually it is a spiritual practice that he does that. So And a key part of this practice is after you've put yourself, of all these practices, a key part of this is after you've put yourself in a position where you need to wait or go slower, use that time to invite God into that moment.
You just heard 8 or 9 ways, practices, tips to slow down. And so don't get overwhelmed with that. It's probably not realistic that you do all 8 of those today or this week. Pick 1 or 2 out. Maybe it's the driving in the slow lane, and pick a day of the week and say, I want to give myself enough time to drive the speed limit, go slow. Maybe the next time you're at the grocery store, pick 1 or 2 out and just try it. Try to be present. Now, Casey, we've said this before we close out with our final practice. This will not revolutionize your life today when you try to slow down one time.
Right. Yeah.
What we're saying is if you will begin to incorporate some of this over the next year, over the next 2 years, 3 years, for you folks working in fast-paced work environments, if you didn't put your schedules back to back to back to back to back, if you've got the freedom to control some of your schedule, if you slow some of that down, maybe move from 7 meetings to 5 meetings, those sorts of things, that over the course of time, your body, your mind, your spiritual center will begin to take on a newly formed, more present, more able to actually hear the voice of the Spirit. You will have more capacity for care, for love. You'll be less prone to get triggered into irritation, not today, but over the long haul.
Yeah, so well said. This is definitely a long game kind of thing when we're engaging in spiritual practices. So today, we always want to practice something. This is the Practicing the Practices podcast. So one thing that we thought would be great to practice today would be slowing down your breathing. And so we're going to do an exercise today. This is just a great breath exercise to learn. It's called box breath. It helps to slow down our breath, and that practice starts to calm our nervous system and begins the process of slowing things down. So when you find yourself frantic, anxious, or rushing, the simple breath technique is a great tool to become more present and calm. So if you're able, where you are, close your eyes and just begin to notice yourself in your space, maybe your seat on whatever it is that's holding you up, your feet on the floor, your long spine, and begin to notice your natural breath. Notice how deep or shallow you're breathing. Notice how quickly or slowly you're breathing. And begin to send your breath all the way down to the bottom of your belly so that your belly rounds as you breathe in and deflates as you breathe out. Begin to inhale in through your nose for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold at the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll do that a few more times. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just as you let your breath come back to a natural rhythm, notice any shifts in your nervous system, your body, your spirit, and recognize that this breath is always available to you anytime you feel hurried or anxious.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks for listening. Thanks for practicing. As always, to make sure you get future episodes, hit subscribe or follow on your favorite platform. Until next time, this is Bradford Casey. Grace and peace.